A case of a rare fever has been reported in Brownsville. Bill?
Coming up on sports, tonight's high school football scores, including pictures from Nixon and United.
In the weather, we'll take a look at tomorrow's weather map. Mike?
Both stories and more coming up on Pro 8 News, Laredo's first choice for TV News.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here at What the Peg, WTP. That is our podcast, and we're here. Remember, sustainability speaks louder, and we're really excited. I'm honored. I'm humbled by the opportunity to have some time and have that one-on-one real talk, how we call it, with this individual. I mean, they're part of my communities. They've been, an icon here in Laredo, Texas, for years. This person has been a meteorologist for over 42 years, and they've been really successful here in Laredo. And I'm kind of, I don't know. Estoy muy emocionado también porque pues lo veo en la tele todos los días, de lunes a viernes, en las noticias, y pues he aprendido bastante de él. Y hoy me toca poder entrevistarlo. Y entonces, his name is, we call him Heatwave here in Laredo. Heatwave is here with us, and his name is actually Richard Burler, but his nickname is Heatwave. And we're going to learn about where that came from, but without further ado, Heatwave, thank you so much for coming on What the Peg, and we're excited to have you. And then, of course, we have Rafael and Sophie joining us, and we're full of questions, full of we've been waiting, excited to have you here. So thank you again for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Thank you.
So we were talking a little bit about how the nickname came about. So Heatwave, I don't know. I've always known as it's Heatwave, but I did a little research, and the main reason why, or maybe I'm wrong, but it's because you love the heat.
Yes. I grew up in Connecticut, and we averaged maybe 15 days a year that would hit 90, and my goal was to see 100 degrees. And we got up to 99 on May 19th of 1962 when I was 8 years old, and just couldn't get the extra degree. And then in 63 it got up to 98, and then in 64 it hit 99 on June 30th, and on July 1st the forecast was for 100 plus, so I was just thrilled. And we got up to 99, and then the clouds moved in, and it was all over.
It was all over.
So when I went to the Weather Bureau in 64 at age 10, I was looking through some of the climatological data, and I saw that Laredo hit 100 in February one year. I couldn't believe any place could hit 100, so I started following Laredo weather, and I was determined that someday I would get to walk the streets of Laredo at high noon.
And here we are, how many years later in Laredo?
Well, I've been at KGNS in my position since Valentine's Day of 80.
Okay.
Wow.
So we do the math, that's over 42 years.
Yeah, 42
Okay.
plus.
Pretty beautiful. So so I want to go back to how it all started. So growing up in Connecticut, how was that? How was little Heatwave running around in Connecticut like?
Well, I had my paper route when I
Okay.
was in the second grade on, and I really was interested in weather as far back as I can remember. When I was in second grade, I sent to the government, I ordered a publication which had the climatology, the temperatures and rainfall data for 600 cities around the world, and it cost 5 cents to
Wow.
get that
Oh, wow.
back then. And I'd go around the playground telling people what the weather typically would be like in Timbuktu or in Khartoum, Sudan, or any of the hot places I could find. And
In that first, so growing up, you were, since far as you can remember, you were interested in the weather and how hot it could get,
yeah.
mainly in the heat, right? Mainly that was your kind of like,
Well, I liked all kinds of weather. When I was in the third grade, I discovered the New York Times had the weather map, not just with the fronts, but they would actually have the isobars, and I was thrilled. And the Weather Bureau used to let me have old data so I could learn how to draw my own maps. And once I got into the sixth grade, my dad got me a shortwave radio so I could pick up all the weather observations being read for the pilots. And I could plot my own maps every hour. Also on longwave radio, there was reports for the pilots.
wow.
And starting sixth grade on, with the morning announcements, they gave me a spot to put on a weather forecast.
And that, so that's beautiful that your dad also kind of encouraged you with that tool, and so it didn't come from like a family member or so. It was a spark in you that said, "Hey, I want to learn about, the weather. What's behind this whole weather thing and how it reacts and how it, the history and forecasting it."
Well, the only thing that I can think of that may have sparked an interest was when I was 4 or 5, I was afraid of lightning. I knew the thunder was fine. That wouldn't harm you, but it was the lightning. And I would wake everyone up in the house if we had lightning in the middle of the night. And I think that sparked a curiosity in the weather.
Beautiful. Nice. So, I don't know. Is it okay if I start with some other questions, or did you guys?
Sure.
Rafa?
No, you're good.
Okay. So I have a bunch of questions here. And one of them was so the whole, so we know where the nickname came from. And now just a little curiosity, when I've been a witness of it, and we just talked about how you got back from your 4.5-mile power walk. When you got here to Laredo, was that one of the first things that you started doing? I mean, I know a lot of people have been witnessing or been witness of you power walking around mainly the airport area, right? That's where you hang out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I used to ride bicycles a lot. There was one year where I got in over 7,000 miles in a year, and I was in the centennial celebration for Wyoming, the Laredo contingent, Laredo Bicycle Club. We went from Yellowstone to Cheyenne, a 630-mile, 7-day ride, and I had a 20-mile route, a 30, and a 36-mile route that I would alternate 5 days during the 5 days of the work week.
Wow.
But I got hit in 2000, so I switched from bicycling to speed walking.
Okay. It's like maybe 2 feet is easier than 2 wheels. Yeah. No. Well, so then, and you so how did you get here to Laredo? Because what I understood, you were in Connecticut, and then from Connecticut you went over to Florida.
Yeah, Florida State, and then I got my job at a CBS station in Duluth, Minnesota, which is about as cold as you can get. And we had 5 days in a row at one point where the high of the day failed to even reach 0. And on the 6th day, it got up to 3, and it actually felt kind of mild outside. But it was fun to forecast. I just didn't like being in it after I made the forecast. And I found out that there was an opening in Laredo, so I applied, and I was thrilled to be able to come down here.
So how did Laredo land on your radar?
Well, back when I was 10 years old and discovered that it hit 100 in February.
So that's what the interest was. It was the heat in Laredo, what I learned today from Heatwave was that Laredo is probably the only city
Yeah,
that or
in the
this
winter time, in the winter and spring months, we on occasion will have access to air that gets heated up over the Mexican plateau, 3, 4, 5,000 feet in altitude, and in the winter, spring months, weather features, the westerlies, occasionally will transport that air eastward above the southern portions of the nation. And in most places in the country, it arrives aloft above a different air mass. But here, sometimes it will actually uh, descend all the way down to the surface, heating up 5.5 degrees for every 1,000 feet it descends. So if it started out as in the 80s over the Mexican plateau, by the time that arrives here in Laredo, we can be over 100. And since I got here in 1980, we've had 6 February days that have topped 100 degrees. Nowhere else in the country can do that.
So February is a close month to your heart. It holds a special spot because that's when you got here to Laredo, February 14th, Valentine's Day,
Yeah.
and it's one of the hottest days
Well,
ever anywhere.
yeah, when you compare it to elsewhere in the country, 100-degree heat isn't common even in Laredo in February, but nowhere else can do that. In the summertime, the lower 5,000 feet of the atmosphere, the winds on most days are coming in from the east and southeast, so we have too much of a Gulf influence to get those extreme temperatures in the summer. So it gets to 100 on many days. We average 74 days a year that hit 100 or higher. But in the desert Southwest, actually there's a couple of things going on. They're a little bit further north in latitude than we are, so in the summertime, the days are longer than at our latitude. If you got to the Arctic Circle, you would have a 24-hour day.
Yeah.
And the sun's still pretty high above the horizon, so it works out that the extra hours of daylight more than compensate for the sun being higher above the horizon up to about latitude 36 in late June or early July.
Yeah.
So southern Arizona, southern California, away from the Gulf influence, can have some much hotter temperatures than we have during that part of the year. Death Valley, which is 36.5 north, twice in the last 2 years has hit 130 degrees.
Dang.
Oh.
Okay, but nobody lives in those areas, right? I
Well,
imagine.
they have people that are there all year long, but it's
Yeah.
not a big population.
Right.
Okay.
Um, February, talking about February, my daughter was born February 11th, Luna. So that's also a special month. I won't forget when you got here, February of 1980.
80.
Beautiful. Okay. So that was what hooked you, the heat to Laredo. So you get to Laredo and you got here. I imagine you moved all your stuff here. You traveled down to.
It wasn't hard. I fit everything I owned in my car. I think the station was going to allow me $1,000 moving expense,
Okay.
including hotel, eating, and everything else. I think I cost them $148. And I-35 ends in Duluth, so I didn't even need a map. I just got on the highway and
interstate.
drove until it ended.
Nice. And have you ever been to? Because we're in a border town here in Laredo. Have you ever been to Nuevo Laredo?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
How was your first time crossing over the river?
Well, actually, that was in 1977 before I started at
Oh,
KGNS.
okay.
I used to take Greyhound 2-week passes where you'd buy a ticket that was good for 2 weeks, and all you had to do is be back where you wanted to be when those 2 weeks ended. And that was when I was planning to see what Laredo was like for my first time, not knowing that I would eventually get to work here. And
Wow.
so took the bus from Duluth and went down through Kansas City, which used to be where the Storm Prediction Center is that issues all the tornado watches.
Right.
And it was 3:30 in the morning, and I knocked on the door, and they let me in, and I got to meet a lot of the people that I've read textbooks by. And then I got back on the bus and went through Las Vegas down to El Centro, and I thought that from there I would go across Phoenix, El Paso, and then down to Laredo. But I saw I had an extra day, so I got on a Transporte del Norte bus and went down through Hermosillo, Guaymas, Mazatlan, Guadalajara, Querétaro, Mexico City, up to Monterey. And the first time I ever walked into Laredo was by walking across the bridge from Nuevo Laredo to Laredo.
That's
That's funny.
that's interesting. So you experienced your first time in Laredo coming in through the Mexican border, coming over to Laredo.
And I stayed at the Plaza Hotel, which is now the bank building down there. But it was still the Plaza Hotel.
Hey, that's quite a road trip. I mean, yeah, that's cool. I mean, I don't know and how was the weather during that time?
Well, it was August, so I got to see some 100-degree heat.
Yeah. And that was exciting.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, most people think that, most people aren't too excited for hot weather. I know people here in Laredo are like, I'm not excited for it to be over 100. But you feel like do you get excited every time it hits over 100?
Yeah, I get a kick out of it. And I certainly had my time this year. We had a 69-day out of a 70-day stretch. We had 69 of those 70 days hit 100 or higher. But since August 22nd, I think we haven't seen 100-degree heat, which is unusual. Usually, even in September, you'll have 6 days that hit 100.
And does that so that's unusual, but do you think there's something behind that, like why we haven't hit, those usual hot days?
Well, that's kind of random, but if you look at the long-term trends, daytime temperatures haven't changed a whole lot over the last 40 years. We've edged up a little, but nighttime temperatures are noticeably warmer. When I got here in 1980, we'd average 4, 5, 6 nights a year that stayed over 80 all night long.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing most years 15, 20, 25 nights that stay over 80 all night long. In 2019, we had 41 nights that didn't get under 80. So that's what I'm noticing the most. Precipitation hasn't changed a whole lot, but the most noticeable thing climate change-wise I'm seeing is the warmer nights as we go along.
Beautiful. So as we're talking, I feel like you're like encyclopedia of like records of all the weather, and I feel like you're so passionate about the weather and the forecasting and the history behind it, and I think that plays a huge role in our community and why the success of your career has been here in Laredo is because you're so passionate. Do you feel like it's work? Do you feel like no? Do you like that? That's beautiful, and I think that's what makes somebody so successful is going to work but feeling like you haven't worked a day in your life, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that the same? Is that the same for you?
Yeah, there's always something new to learn. It's kind of like a kaleidoscope. You never quite get the same pattern. There's always something new to look at, and it's a living type of thing. I've had a 42 years here, 4 years in Duluth, so a 46-year career. You wouldn't believe how much the science has matured and how the observational tools have grown. So it's and I imagine it's the same in most careers if you compare 1970s, 1980 to what's going on now. But it's just a thrilling thing to be a part of.
And I think that's what wrapping it back to the sustainability part of our podcast and why we were so excited to bring Heatwave is because we feel like we use the weather, our community, we use the forecast and we depend on it so much. And that's what I think, a part of our community development and sustainability as far as like a community. I feel like the weather forecasting and meteorologists play a big role here. I know the tools also, the technology. So you've seen a pattern of, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it's been the evolution of technology and tools for you to be able to do your homework or your job. Do you think it's gotten easier for you?
Yeah, to some degree. When I started, the numerical models of the atmosphere that you run on a computer were much more primitive. The computational power was much more limited. So the models had maybe 4 vertical layers of the atmosphere, and the data points were about 70 miles apart. So you could capture a large-scale feature like a front sweeping across hundreds of miles, but you couldn't capture the smaller scale things. Now the models are running with data points every 2 or 3 miles, and you have about 64 vertical layers, so you begin to capture smaller scale things like a cluster of thunderstorms. And the data that was missing when I started in the 70s, with the data points 70 miles apart, all the weather that you're missing would make the whole simulation wander off of what's actually going to take place in a time span of 2 or 3 days. So an extended forecast back in the 70s was 3 days out. Now, with so much better modeling, and I'm just talking computational power, I'm not talking about all the knowledge that we've gained in making the models, the equations, better, more comprehensive. But now we're about as accurate 7 days out as we were 3 days out when I started.
And what do you think is the hardest part of forecasting the weather?
Well, part of it is the communications. People don't necessarily understand probabilities. Like if I say 20% chance of a shower and it rains, they'll think, well, you only said 20% chance. But it's kind of like that pot of boiling water. You put it on the stove and turn it on. You know for sure it's going to boil. You might be able to make a statement as to how vigorously it will boil. But there's no way you can forecast when and where in that pot each individual bubble comes up. And it's the same with the scattered showers in the afternoon. I know that there's going to be some, but I can't say until they start to show up on radar where each bubble is coming up. And another facet of it is, oh, well, he said 20% chance. So even if it does rain, that's a low number. It means it would just be light rain, even if it did occur. In the summertime, those showers, even though they're scattered, you can get an inch or two out of some of those thunderstorms.
Okay, so 20% chance of rain means it's going to rain.
That there's a 20% chance at any given spot in your forecast area. So if you're doing the whole thing correctly, if you have a large sample of 20% chances, 20% of that population should have actually had rainfall at your spot that you're verifying it for. If it turned out that 60% of the time it rained when you had a 20% chance, that means you're not doing something right.
Okay. So just to recap, right? So it means, so if I'm in like, a 3-mile radius and I say in this 3-mile radius or 5-mile radius, it's 20% of it chance of rain, meaning it is going to rain and it's going to be at a 20% of that radius.
No, it's a 20% chance that that little radius has a shower during the time you're forecasting for.
Okay.
So on some of the days that you say 20% chance, nothing will happen at all.
Okay.
Some of the days, a lot of the area will get it. But if you're doing it right, and you have a spot that you're verifying it for. Let's say you look at a population of 100, 20% chance forecast. If you're doing it right, if it's calibrated properly, it should be pretty close to 20% of the time that you forecasted a 20% chance of rain that it actually rained at that spot.
Yeah, right. Okay. Perfect. I still have some of those questions, but we'll probably go over, because yeah, so it is kind of if you say, he only said 20%, but there's still a 20% chance it's going to rain. It doesn't mean, why did it rain if it was only 20%? That's kind of like where we were talking about. I know. What's like the craziest, I think, weather that you've covered that you can remember?
Well, I think the most bizarre one of that in the time that I've been here was October 9th of 2000. We had an Arctic air mass that moved southward from Canada, and Concordia, Kansas got down to 21 degrees, which was the coldest they've ever been that early in the season. And that cold air poured southward across Texas. And meanwhile, aloft, we had some Pacific moisture that moved in overhead, so we had a cloud cover, and it was a thick enough layer of moisture where it started to rain, and that helped cool things even more as the rain fell through what was originally a dry air mass. Some of it evaporated, and kind of like rubbing alcohol on your skin, as it evaporates, it removes heat from your skin and cools it off. So the air was cooled off by the evaporation of the rain falling through what was already a cold air mass. And the high of the day, October 9th, the average high of the day that time of year is 89. We had a high of the day of 44.
Okay, in October.
In October. I don't know if I could show a picture.
Sure.
I have
Yeah.
it might take me a second to find it, but I have a.
Or if you can send it to, we'll share it on the screen. So whenever we're done here, you can share it with us,
Okay.
and then I'll put it up on the. We'll be able to share it on the screen right now.
Okay. I think I could probably find it. Here it is. I'll show it to you. You can see the normal curve there where it peaks at about 89 degrees, and you can see where 44 falls on that curve.
Okay, so that's like never, right? So
Yes, it's like never.
and this is this is the normal
Yeah. So
Normal.
that's the bell-shaped distribution of
a day.
of temperatures on in October 9th in Laredo, and you can see how far removed from the
the spectrum we're at.
yeah,
So we're at 44, October 9th of
of 2000.
2000.
So I would say
And
that
then-
was the most exceptional day that I've seen occur here.
Yeah. No, and it's have you ever been, I mean, a lot of people are into like I would say storm chasing. Have you ever been into that?
No,
No? Okay, good. Because I know it can be pretty dangerous, right?
yeah, you have to know what you're doing. You can position yourself in a spot where it's going to be hard to recover from. If you punch through the rain, you might find yourself punching through to the part of the storm where the tornado, it will suddenly be visible too late.
Have you ever been part of where kind of like you've found something like hey, I found that this we got to be careful, or something like like exciting or maybe dangerous, or something where like, hey guys, I've forecasted that we got to take cover because there's going to be, some emergency, or we got to get people to know that like there's a meteor coming and going to hit Laredo. Have you ever been part of something news like that?
Well, when we had rotating thunderstorms, there are a couple of times where I suggested that it might be a good time to put as many walls between you and the outside where debris could possibly be flying around that could go through a window.
Okay.
And in 2002, I guess it was, on June 3rd, we had what's called a macro burst, which was about 2 to 4 miles in width, with 70 to 100 mile per hour winds that came through town, and that did a bit of damage.
And you were able to kind of foresee that happening.
Yeah, but that you didn't, like that pot of water.
You didn't know
We knew that the potential was there, and then once it materialized, you could track it down I-35. It actually almost followed I-35 southwestward into town. It came in from just east of due north into town.
So it took the highway to Laredo.
It did, yeah.
That's great. No, I mean, I bet, and that's important. I think if there's anything happening, I mean, the weather is one of the things that can prevent us from accidents or things like, hey, I'm gonna go grab a pizza in the middle of a thunderstorm. Like, it's good to be informed, and I know you've done a great job here at in our community in keeping us informed. What I was gonna ask, so there's two things that I'm kind of curious. So I think the U.S. is the only country that uses Fahrenheit,
Yeah.
right? How do you feel about that? I mean, do you think is that kind of accurate, or why do people use Celsius and not Fahrenheit? What do you know the story behind that?
Well, that's the metric system, and I think it would be better to be on the metric system. And most 1 degree Celsius is the equivalent of 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. So what they do in a lot of the countries is they'll measure the temperature to the nearest tenth of a degree Celsius. Because if you just did to the nearest centigrade degree, that's a bigger bin, say.
So from 20 degrees Celsius to 21,
68 to 69.8.
Yeah, so that's a big difference, right? I mean, when you're putting the AC, so the AC the Fahrenheit has more
gradations
than
the centigrade.
Centigrade.
The only thing I like about Fahrenheit is that 38 centigrade doesn't sound as impressive as 100 Fahrenheit.
Okay. So you would have broken your record easier if it would have been in Celsius.
Well, no, it would have been just as hard to reach that temperature, but somehow saying it's 38 doesn't sound as impressive as saying it's 100 degrees out there.
True. Do you guys have questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So I know you're from Connecticut. Where did you study and what did you study?
Went to Florida State and meteorology.
Okay, yeah.
Let me guess.
No, but I was like thinking there was like a major or a minor.
Yeah,
or
So
bachelor.
if somebody wants to be a meteorologist one day, and let's say my little nephew says, I want to be like the next heat wave, what do you think would be the kind of the
path.
the rite of
Cool.
Well,
the passage over to heat wave?
There's many math classes, physics classes, statistics. If you're into climate change, you'd want to have a background in chemistry, where you understand the radiational impact of the different gases. Some absorb the radiation and then re-radiate it back down to the surface as heat. Some gases allow the heat to escape to space very readily and don't play as big a role. Carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor are all very effective at absorbing and re-radiating, escaping heat back down towards the surface. So those contribute to warming.
Nice.
Okay.
So we got the stepping stones for the next heat wave coming in. So
And you want to be, I used to assume that all you needed was the math and physics and the science, but you really want to have the communication skill as well,
Yeah.
because, in fact, my field has realized in the last couple of decades that a perfect forecast is useless if the consumer of the forecast doesn't understand the forecast.
So you gotta kind of put it in layman's terms too. It's like, hey,
Yeah, so
you
they've
know,
brought in the social sciences to try to help in the messaging. For example, hurricane surge forecast. How do you convey that so that the population along the coast recognizes that this is a truly life-threatening situation? I should follow the evacuation mandates. In fact, some of the emergency managers, in the case of Ian, in the Fort Myers, Naples area, didn't appreciate the messaging. And so now the community, once again, is trying to figure out, well, how do we successfully get the appropriate measures to be taken based on what we're forecasting?
and do you think that's because is that because of censorship? Like, are people too afraid to
No.
like lay it on there? Like, hey, hide your kids, hide your wife. Like, you guys are gonna, run into trouble. Or are they trying to like sugarcoat it, or because you can scare people, right? Like, you can cause a panic. Is that where you're getting at? Like, you have to be, you know, you have to know how to get your message across.
Yeah, it has to be conveyed in a understandable fashion, and not just that it's going to rain or it's going to hit 90 degrees, but what impact does
Yeah.
that have?
Okay.
3 inches of rain in an hour in a in a river basin, that could mean that it's coming
Flooding.
down faster than it can drain away, and you could have flooding. So you have to get beyond the forecast to what impacts are plausible with such a forecast.
Rafita, I feel like Rafa's being a little too quiet today.
No, I've been enjoying.
I think it's the
learning.
beard. He's missing the beard. He just shaved, and it's weird not seeing him with a beard.
I had a beard from my Florida State days through
Oh, yeah?
1983,
Nice.
and they had a fundraiser for leukemia, and so I said, well, I'll take my beard off if you come up with $500, not expecting that would
It would
materialize,
happen.
and it came up immediately, so I had to take it off, and I thought, well, I'll just grow it back, and I looked in the mirror and I thought, yeah, I think I probably look better without it.
It never came back. That's
No.
funny. But yeah, Rafita, dinos
No,
algo.
I was gonna ask, would you say, um, here in Laredo, do you think it's extreme weather we have when it comes to rain or even sunshine? Like, I don't know. I guess growing up, I always thought, man, Laredo's so extreme in the sense where it can be mildly, I guess, warm, and then the next instant it's like,
Well, you're correct that it can change quite a bit. For example, this year on February 22nd, it was 97 degrees at 4 in the afternoon. On the 23rd, one day later at 4 in the afternoon, it was 47.
yeah,
So,
yeah. That's what I mean, growing up here, I did notice that happening a lot. But yeah.
Heatwave, did you learn it? Have you learned any Spanish being here in Laredo?
I'm lucky I learned English. I'm much more comfortable with numbers than language, which is kind of an odd deal because my interface with the consumers, the viewers, is language.
Yeah.
I didn't learn how to talk until I was about 3.5.
Okay. I didn't know if I should like throw in some Spanish in there, but I didn't want to confuse anyone. But so going back to what the extreme weather. So maybe I'm wrong, but what I understand about climate change, I don't know if a lot of people don't believe in climate change. First of all, do you believe in climate change?
Well, it's not It's not a belief like a religion. It's you're just looking at the science. And when I was born, we had I think about 310 parts per million, maybe even a little bit less of carbon dioxide molecules in the atmosphere. Now it's up to about 415, and they're very effective at re-radiating the heat from the Earth's surface back down towards the surface, as opposed to allowing them to escape to space. So it's just simple physics that you should expect a warming. And all the instrumentation, all the observations are showing that the temperatures since the industrial age began have climbed. We've climbed about 1.1, 1.2 degrees centigrade, so that's just over 2 degrees Fahrenheit since the late 1800s. And you can see the melting of the glaciers, the rising of sea level, I mean, almost any measure you look at, you're seeing changes that are all pointing in the same direction. Not every weather event is caused by climate change, but it's kind of like loading the dice. You have a better chance of having this or that happen. Yeah. For example, this is confusing to people. Places like the Midwest, the central Great Plains would tend to get drier over time. But at the same time, the heaviest rainfall days, if you look at the heaviest rain of the year, will tend to be more, even though the overall climate is drying. The heaviest days of rain will be heavier because as you get a warmer atmosphere, the air can hold more water vapor in the air, water in the form of a gas.
Like a cloud, right?
Okay.
Yeah, well, it becomes a cloud when it condenses into water droplets.
Okay.
But with more water available in the atmosphere, due to it being warmer, when it does rain, there's more water available to that cloud to then pour out. Yeah. So that's what can increase your chances of flooding rain events, even though the climate overall has been drying. And right now, most of the West and the Great Plains is experiencing drought conditions. And you can see the Colorado River has had some problems now.
So then climate change is real, and it is happening. I want to continue talking about this. I have a couple other questions regarding, climate change, where you see kind of, or you forecast a little bit, and then a couple other interesting questions that I'm bringing up. But before we continue, I want to invite everybody at home, whatever time it may be morning time, afternoon, evening. If you guys want to have a beer or some tea or some coffee or orange juice, whatever you're doing at home, let's get a quick refill, and we'll be right back. Los queremos invitar a que echen un refill y pues echen una cervecita, se relajen con nosotros, relax, have a good time. It's a smooth talk with our guest Heatwave, and we'll be back in just a quick refill. All right, everybody at home, let's continue with our awesome, podcast, What the Peg, WTP, Sustainability Speaks Louder. I hope everybody at home got a little refill. I know we got some green tea going on today, and for Heatwave, and after his 4.5 mile power walk. So I hope everybody at home is having a good time, and enjoying their beer or whiskey or tequilita, whatever it may be. But we were just talking about climate change, and is it real? A lot of people say, hey, like, you always have those arguments of like, is the Earth really flat or round? So for those flat earthers out there, we gotta not a belief, but it's just what it is. It's the reality of things.
Science.
It's science. I believe in science kind of thing. So where's that movie from? Nacho Libre. Well, I believe in science, and so so my thing was, it's not a belief, right? And it made so much sense. What it is, it's like the lack of or the more gases there is, or the things that help things evaporate or that affect. We have an expert in the field, so we have a Heatwave. You were mentioning, the precipitation or the rain gets more intense because of the way the molecules gather, right? Or the gases help things develop. As far as I wish I could make it sound smart and say all these. Hey, Florida State, you did a great job with Heatwave. But yeah, can you tell us a little bit more of how you can tell that climate change is here and it's happening, and if you see if there's any possible way we can kind of because is it a bad thing? I mean, do you think it's a bad thing?
Yeah, it's not.
It's not the best.
It's not the best.
Okay.
And even on even something like, say, bird migrations are impacted because they've tended to migrate where if they migrate from, say, South America or Mexico up to northern Canada, it's timed out where when they get to northern Canada, the flowers or the bugs that they consume are either flowering or the bugs have come out, timed with about when they arrive. But the northern latitudes are warming quicker than the southern latitudes near the equator. It's warming a little near the equator, but much more quickly in the northern latitudes, partly because the ice is starting to melt, and instead of having a white reflective surface, now you either have the ground, or in the case of ocean, a dark surface, which instead of reflecting the heat back to space, it's absorbing it. So that's resulting in a faster rate of temperature rise in the Arctic areas. So the birds arrive, but since it warmed up faster now than in decades ago, the flowers or the bugs that they depend on have matured, come out faster. So they get up there, and it's already happened, the bugs or the flowers or whatever they're depending on.
They're late to the game now and then that's what, I mean, they have nothing to survive on now.
Yeah,
right?
It's tougher. And I mean, no matter what you look at, like trees, various varieties of trees are now starting to move to higher and higher altitudes in the mountains, and their northern range is starting to spread further to the north. And this has not just trees, but just agriculture. What kind of crops can you grow? Now, farmers might have to decide that a different...
Who's here?
Who's here?
Come in. Oh, okay.
So it's not, it's a global type of thing, and we're part of the global system, humans, but the whole world around us is impacted by the changing climate. And climate has always changed, and the weather is, what's happening day by day. And so you'll always have these variations, but it's variations above a climbing line of temperature. So you still have winter time where it's colder than in the summer, and you'll still have freezes, but you're getting less and less freezes with those variations as that line gets higher and higher.
Yeah.
So
So does that mean more extreme weather?
it can mean more extreme weather. For example, in our part of the country, although the heaviest days of rain may be heavier than what we used to have, and Harvey was an example that struck southeast Texas.
Yeah.
They got 50, 60 inches of rain out of that system because the atmosphere can hold so much more moisture, being a warmer atmosphere. The warmer the atmosphere, the more water you can hold in that atmosphere. But a lot of the time, with where it's warmer aloft, the atmosphere is more stable, so it's a little bit harder to get air to lift to produce the tall rain clouds. So overall, you may
So it's
have
stuck.
longer periods of dry weather where you can have drought conditions, and that's what's happening over the Great Plains and westward through the Rockies, the Colorado River. But when it does rain, you can get flooding rains out of it.
And I think that's what happened not so long ago with Monterrey. It's what
Oh, yeah.
what happened is that, I mean, like what you're mentioning, just you know, I guess that moisture gets kind of locked in there. Doesn't get too high to be able to come down with those rain or as with the clouds, and it's just kind of in limbo. Is that what I'm kind of getting at?
Yeah, and they've recovered some now. So
Well, and that was to my next point was cloud seeding. Have you heard of that?
that's not usually a very effective approach. The jury is still somewhat out on it, but the general feeling is that if it wasn't going to rain, you're not going to get rain from cloud seeding. You'll get perhaps more rain on a day that it already would have rained. And I'm talking about summer tall shower clouds, kind of like what we get. The estimation is maybe if you averaged it out over a 30-year period, you might get 10 or 15% more rain than you would have had. And in our summer months, we average maybe 12 inches of rain. So if you got 10% more, you might add 1.25 inches to that.
Okay.
So it would come down to, is it economically worth getting to spend the money that it costs to get that 1.25 inches more? Maybe it is worth it. Plus, it's a checkerboard type of thing. You don't know where each cloud's going to be. So over the 30-year period, it might average out to 10 or 15% increase, but some years, if you just were lucky where the cloud was seeded, happened to be over your area of interest, maybe you did better, but there's a bunch of other years, even though you're cloud seeding, the clouds
You might
missed
have
your spot and you didn't benefit at all.
So you went and you spent a bunch of money and seeded these clouds that probably ended up in another part of the area.
So, maybe 10 or 15% increase.
So because a lot of people were giving credit, and I mean, I don't know much about it, but they were giving credit to the governor of Nuevo León, which is where the area of Monterrey, what I'm talking about, giving him credit because supposedly, I don't know, but he was the one that made the call and the investment to seed some clouds around there. And my understanding is after the seeding, it started pouring, and everybody was happy. But
the data that we do have shows overall not just a modest increase. And again, it only works on days that it would have rained in the first place.
So it would have rained anyway. It just
But
happened.
you may have made the clouds somewhat more efficient.
Okay.
And again, over the long term, you might get a 10 or 15% increase.
So it's not that he made it rain, but he made it maybe rain 10% more.
Yeah, perhaps.
Okay. So that's funny because if people were like, no, man, if it wasn't for the governor, it wouldn't have rained. I was like, wait, what? I was so confused, but now it makes a lot more sense. So, Yeah, that was cloud seeding. I know we can go on and on, but I do want I know you got things to do, and we definitely want to make um you know the the impact for this interview, and I feel like we've gotten a really good content, and I've learned a lot,
Me
to
too.
be honest, and I hope
Honestly,
everybody
yeah.
at home has learned a lot and is excited to keep watching these types of podcasts and I love it when people comment. When they like or do the ring the little bell on our social media, and keep following us. Keep everybody that's like Heatwave that is involved with this, and experts. We thank you for coming on. And my last question is, before I give the opportunity to Rafael and to Sophie, but what's the what's the forecast for heat wave? What's the future hold for Mr. Burler? Are we gonna have a lot more years, or do you feel like you're gonna be in Laredo, for the rest of your days here, enjoying the nice heat?
Well, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
I'm, eventually, I guess I'll have to stop. Uh, but I mean, my interest won't stop. But
Right.
I'm 68 and a half, so I imagine that at some point I'll have to stop. But I don't see that happening yet.
No.
And
And God has blessed us with a lot of years, and hopefully more to come, and muchos años más, como las mañanitas. Um, ¿Así dicen las mañanitas?
No,
Ajá. Pues
no sé.
and many more. Wait, is it happy birthday? Sorry. And many more, like a happy birthday song. Anyway, you guys know where I was going, but I do enjoy watching your forecast, and appreciate your hard work here for the community. And I, you know, if that when that day comes, when you're ready to move on to the next phase, and hopefully we can gather around and meet again, and have a nice talk like this. We'd be happy to have a little going away party for you. And yeah, I don't know if Rafita, pregúntale algo, estás muy calladito.
No, I know, like Alvaro was mentioning, you have been part of the community. We all recognize you in so many ways. Actually, one of our, I guess, coworkers here, Kimberly, she's a huge fan, and she was asking me right now if I could get your autograph. So hopefully, she can also, get to meet you. And, like Alvaro said, if you're ever back with us, I know that we always want to learn new things. You really kind of broaden our information,
Are you
mind.
are you crying right now?
No,
I-
but yes.
Uh, each day I'll put several tweets out on Twitter at Heatwave KGNS, and what I like about Twitter is that as soon as I put it out there, it goes out. Whereas if you're on, say, Facebook, they have an algorithm that tries to figure out what people
Oh.
want to see. So a lot of people, if let's say it's an important weather event, thunderstorms moving in, they'll either never see the message or they'll get it perhaps after it's already happened. So I like to put stuff on Twitter.
So we're gonna
We
start
can
putting stuff
follow
on Twitter.
him on Twitter.
On Twitter, yeah. That's interesting. I didn't know that it worked that way. That Twitter doesn't use those algorithms. It's like if people are following you, they get that message.
Yeah,
So
but I guess if you're following hundreds or thousands of people, my tweet would
Might
be
miss it.
among thousands of other tweets, so you still might not see it.
And it's funny, you mentioned it caught me my attention. So, and I know we're wrapping up, but one question that I had was, so you went to Mexico without knowing any Spanish, and you crossed to Laredo not knowing any Spanish from the Mexican side. So how were you able to communicate?
It worked.
It worked.
And I found my way to the weather service in Mexico City.
Oh wow.
I mean, you'd think I'd go to all the museums and everything, but I went right to the weather service, and I still have their publication on the climate data for 800 cities around Mexico.
Wow. And there was no Google behind, like, where you can Google stuff on.
Not then.
No. So you so what was the day that you because there was a day that caught my attention, that was the day Elvis Presley died. That was when you were
On the Transportes del Norte bus in Mexico. And,
yeah.
And I didn't speak Spanish, and none of the bus riders spoke English, but everybody understood Elvis. I pulled in a radio station from Ciudad Obregón that was playing nothing but Elvis, and everyone gathered around, and we
had some. Was there some beers involved or no?
No,
No? Do you like drinking? Do you drink?
not much at all.
No?
Maybe once or twice a year I'll have a beer, and on New Year's I'll have a glass of champagne.
Ooh.
Oh, nice.
Well, next time we'll have some champagne or some beer for you when we come back and have our next chat. So, Sophie, ¿una
I'm good.
preguntita más?
No, I'm good.
You're good? Okay. Well, Heatwave, I don't know if you'd like to share anything with us. If you have questions for
us?
What the Peg, how did you feel? I mean, could you get used to podcasts like this?
Yeah, I don't know how much more I could contribute, but I
I feel like-
appreciate you
no.
having me over for this.
No, yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for, and everybody at home, like I said, thank you for joining us. Gracias por estar con nosotros hoy. Y espero que les haya gustado aquí What the Peg, WTP, Sustainability Speaks Louder. And it was a great time with Richard Heatwave Burler. So again, round of applause for Heatwave. And thank you everybody at home. Muchas gracias. Saludos. Nos
Bye.
vemos. Bye.